Hi, welcome back to Digital Defense. I'm your host, Jordan Robertson. This is our weekly cybersecurity show broadcasting to you live from Bloomberg News, Washington, D.C. Bureau, where we give you advice to help secure your digital life. As always, this is an audience-driven show, so wherever you're watching this, we're broadcasting live on the Bloomberg terminal, Bloomberg.com, Facebook, and Twitter. And wherever you're watching this, if you want to have us answer some questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So let's dive right in this week. This week we want to talk about AlphaBay. AlphaBay was a large dark web site that was taken down by the Justice Department last week. And what I want to talk with you all about is dark web sites in general and just exactly how they work. A lot of us have heard about these sites. They sell lots of illegal drugs, and they sell malware, and hackers use them. And in some cases, you can even buy hitmen and weapons and things like that on these websites. But I want to talk to you a little bit just about the logistics of how these sites work and what does it mean that the Justice Department took out one of the biggest dark websites on the planet currently. And I'll give you a sneak preview. The answer is it's not going to change a whole lot. These things are kind of the eight-headed hydra. You cut off one, another springs up. But that being said, I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of interesting material in understanding how these sites work, because this really is the way. This is the new drug bazaar. Not even of the future, of the present. This is the way that individuals buy drugs, buy illegal materials these days, and it's important to understand just how they work, because for the average person, it is kind of a black box. So I'll just dive right into it. So AlphaBay was taken out last week. Now, this is not a normal website. One thing that's really important to know about dark web websites is they're not just a normal website. You can't just plug the search term into Google and arrive there. They operate only over the Tor network. And what the Tor network is, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's basically kind of like a parallel network to the normal internet. And when you log onto a website via Tor, your traffic bounces between a bunch of computers, and you don't know them, you don't own them. These are just kind of random computers scattered throughout the globe. And then they arrive at these websites. Now, again, the reason this website, AlphaBay in this case, was not on the normal internet is you can't just go register a website and say, hey, I'm going to set up an illegal drug bazaar. This is going to be my address. This is going to be my name. You have to do it in a hidden way. And these .onion sites, O-N-I-O-N, it refers to the way these websites are created. These websites are basically a hidden service. So you can't just figure out where they are by Google, but you can very easily find them if you're using the Tor anonymization software. So with all that being said, again, once you find these sites, again, not super hard to find them. You just have to jump through a few hoops to get there. What you will find, this is the Justice Department's press release about AlphaBay. You can look at it like 200,000 users as of December 2015, 40,000 vendors. What you'll see here is these sites are mostly used for selling illegal drugs. Now, a lot of us may have personal opinions about whether some of these drugs should be illegal in the first place. Nevertheless, they are illegal, and that is really what AlphaBay was most known for. Some of these dark web sites have specialties. AlphaBay's was illegal narcotics. Others will be malware and will be hacking tools and things like that. But for AlphaBay, it was things like 122 vendors advertising fentanyl, 238 vendors advertising heroin, more than 250,000 listings for illegal drugs and toxic chemicals. And then you'll get to the other stuff, 100,000 listings for fraudulent identification, malware, stolen data, things like that. And all the transactions, of course, are conducted not with cash, but with cryptocurrencies, such as a Bitcoin. Monero was another one as well. So if you're using these services, you're not using cash. You're not using a credit card, in other words, because that obviously leaves a pretty noticeable paper trail for the authorities to follow. So with that kind of overview, again, think of AlphaBay as an online drug market for illegal drugs. One of the things that the Justice Department said that this website was helping facilitate was the opioid crisis. So you can draw a direct line between some of the problems we're having in the U.S. today with painkiller addiction and opioid abuse and heroin abuse. and some of these websites, because you don't have to go down to the street corner. You don't have to go to some bad neighborhood and conduct some sort of illicit transaction with a stranger in person and put your personal safety at risk. You can literally go online and buy this stuff with just the click of a mouse. And I want to show you what one of these screens looks like. I find this pretty fascinating. I suspect you will as well. This was just the error screen that AlphaBay users got when the DOJ seized the website. Kind of your standard, this hidden site has been seized. But this is what I find really interesting. This is a screenshot of what it looks like to buy something from AlphaBay when it was running. I mean, what you've got there, MDMA, you've got ecstasy, you've got Valium, you've got oxycodone, like all of these pills. And you can see, if you look closely, you can see that you can filter it by things like, I want ecstasy pills, I want marijuana, I want stimulants. Like, you can check these things just like you would for any normal online e-tailer website. So from law enforcement's perspective, this is actually a bonanza. This is actually one of the greatest things to come about for law enforcement, because think about it, you've got drug dealers and drug users signing up for these services. It's shooting fish in a barrel. So for all of the hand-wringing you might hear about these dark web sites, it's helpful to think about it from law enforcement's perspective, that busting a site like this gives you not only the site administrator, which we'll get to in a minute, but it also gets you everybody selling the stuff and everybody buying it. So in that sense, kind of the dirty secret of all this is, for law enforcement, this is actually, it's actually a really easy way to catch people, in the act of performing illegal transactions. So I find this pretty fascinating, because what you can do, again, you can click on these things, you can order them, and the next question that I imagine a lot of you are asking, which I've asked myself as well, is, so you buy this stuff, how do you get it? Like, how do you actually get this stuff to your house if you're buying, oxycodone illegally from the internet? Well, the answer is this, to the earlier point about, about the fact that this is a bonanza for law enforcement, you have them ship it to your house. I mean, that's the way this stuff works. You could register a P.O. box under a fake name and a fake credit card number and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're buying this stuff, whether it's weapons or drugs or whatever, in most cases, you're going to have to go pick it up in person. And what happens there is you're supposed to encrypt your address. These website administrators will all tell their users, you need to encrypt your address so only the recipient, the seller, can see it. Most people don't do that. If you're going online to buy prescription pills and you're addicted to drugs, you may not be the most technically proficient person. You're not going on because you're a cybersecurity expert and you know the latest encryption tools. You're going on because you're addicted to drugs or you want drugs for recreational purposes. So what winds up happening is, people click the link and they send their address to these sellers in clear text, as it's called. So it's not encrypted. Again, you think about that from a law enforcement perspective. That's actually really just the single best way to catch, any of these, these drug dealers or users. And I want to emphasize as well, we've got some questions coming in, and we really appreciate it. Please feel free to leave any questions in the comments section, and we're gonna get to those here. Again, this is an audience-driven show. Thanks for the folks who've written in so far. Here's the first question. Why is it so hard to track what happens on the dark web? It's a good question. It gets to a point I made earlier about the fact that these sites, and I'll show you the screenshot again, these websites are not on the normal internet. The reason it's hard to track them is that they are on a service called Tor, T-O-R, and what that means is they're called hidden services. So they have an address, but it's not a normal, Bloomberg.com style address. It is a collection of numbers and letters at a .onion address. What that means is, again, it's a hidden service. It operates outside of the normal internet. But in response to this question, why is it so hard to track what happens? Finding these sites is actually not the hard part. These sites are, you have to think about them as retail operations. They want customers. They want people who want painkillers and other drugs and other illegal materials. They want them to be able to find these sites, so they advertise. Like AlphaBay was not an anonymous site or a deeply hidden site. It was a site that sought to protect the anonymity of users and on both sides. However, the problem becomes these tools, and I think this is a really important point, these anonymization tools are not perfect. So just because you use Tor does not mean that you are anonymous. Law enforcement and intelligence services run a lot of those Tor nodes. They're called nodes. Basically, it's just PCs and servers that run the Tor software that allows traffic to bounce from computer to computer. And I'll give you one great example of how this is, of how this company was broken up. This is a picture I'll show you in a second. So this is a screenshot from the DOJ's indictment. I don't know if you could see this closely, but the way that this got broken up was in the very early days of this website, the guy was sending, the alleged administrator, was sending a welcome email to all new participants. Everybody has to register for these things. Of course, not using your real name. But in the early days, he was using, allegedly, his real email address, which was pimpalex91@hotmail.com. And law enforcement was able to retrieve that. And once they get that email address, it's game over. That was a real email address associated with this person, whose picture I'll show you now. This was a guy named Alexandre Cazes. He was a Canadian living in Thailand. This is the alleged operator, one of the administrators of AlphaBay. He was arrested in Thailand, and he was found hanged in his jail cell in Thailand, believed to be suicide. So, these investigations have serious consequences. And again, the mistake that this person allegedly made was including this email address in his welcome emails when the site was being created. Next question here is, how do you stay anonymous? Well, there's some simple tips. One, if you want to try to be anonymous online, use the Tor software. Very easy. You Google for Tor software, you'll find the website, it takes 5 seconds to download, you run some program on your computer, and then you just log in. It's just a web browser, and it just routes your traffic through these through these proxy servers. However, it's really important to note, if you're going to use Tor to log into your Gmail, that's not private. Like, the way you got to Gmail is private, but the moment you log into your Gmail, anybody who's tracking that connection will know who you are. So the trick with these types of services, not to give a guidebook, but the trick to these kinds of services is not only do users have to be basically perfect in their privacy practices, but users do too, but the administrators do as well. And in this case, clearly the alleged administrator wasn't. So if you're going to try to be anonymous online, truly anonymous, it's very, very hard. I've got some other tips as well, but basically, if you download the Tor software, that's the first step. If you're looking to find these kinds of sites, whether it's for research or whatever, that's kind of the first step that you have to take. The next question here is, what kinds of drugs are sold on the website? Well, I showed a couple of pictures earlier. Basically anything you can imagine. I mean, it's not just drugs. This site was, AlphaBay, was selling all kinds of drugs. There really is anything you can imagine on these sites. This one was a lot of prescription pills, so a lot of painkillers, opioids, heroin. That really is kind of the big scourge of the U.S. public health community here in the U.S. So that was a big market for this website. But anything you can imagine. I mean, cocaine and heroin and any illegal narcotic that people want to get their hands on are available over these sites. Next question is, where do you find the dark web? Well, I explained a little bit earlier. You find dark websites, again, using Tor. Tor is a very valuable tool. It's not just for finding places to buy drugs. It's used by journalists and activists and people, any kind of person who wants to be somewhat anonymous online or to try to protect their privacy online. But that's where you find these sites. And AlphaBay was just one of them. I mentioned at the top of the show that I talk about what does this mean for dark websites going forward. Basically nothing. This was one of the bigger ones. This was doing millions of dollars in revenue, mostly again in illegal narcotics. But all this does is it opens up an opportunity for some other entrepreneur people just to move their business there. So just because they cut off one of the Hydra heads doesn't mean the others won't sprout up as well. So another viewer is asking, can anyone access the dark web through a normal browser? Yeah, absolutely. But you do need the Tor software running on your computer. So there are different ways to do that. I mean, it's pretty easy to find this information online. You do need either the Tor software running on your computer or what they call Tor-aware services. So there are a couple of applications and things that you can download. You can also do it to your mobile phone as well. The Tor software works there as well. But that's how you find these sites. Again, you can find the names, and you can actually find the addresses just by doing a Google search. But to actually get to the sites, that's how you do it. Not that I want to provide a blueprint here, but this is really how it works. It's kind of part of the purpose of the show is to try to demystify how some of this stuff works, and this is a perfect example of that. Question here, which is a good one. Doesn't the FBI have access to Tor? Why can't they shut down these marketplaces faster? It's a very good point, because not only does the FBI have access to Tor, law enforcement and the intelligence community run Tor servers. Let me say that again for everybody who's watching, who's thinking, I'm going to download the Tor software and be completely anonymous online. Law enforcement and intelligence services run Tor servers. Not all of them, but some of them. They've got very good visibility, in fact, into what happens on these networks. The fact that it's not perfect visibility does give people like myself, who's a journalist who uses it, and human rights activists, and anybody else who uses that type of software, some hope that if you want to take even a small step toward protecting your privacy online, Tor is still going to be your best bet. And in response to the question of why can't they shut down these marketplaces faster, the answer is actually parallel to why a lot of the jihadi websites don't get shut down faster. Like these jihadi websites, they have journalists following them online. I mean, these sites are not necessarily secret. The reason they stay online for a long time is because there is a lot of intelligence and law enforcement value in monitoring who's doing what on these sites. Like if you take, for example, the AlphaBay site, I'll just go back to this slide here. Law enforcement was tracking 200,000 users of this site. If you're the Justice Department and one of your mandates is prosecuting people who buy drugs illegally, the ability to monitor 200,000 users is tremendously valuable, but even more valuable is the ability to monitor 40,000 vendors. That's why they keep these sites up. There's a lot of value. They can build criminal cases around it, and it's actually very, very easy. Another question here is, why did it take this long for them to get caught? Again, it's not a matter of law enforcement not knowing that AlphaBay exists. Again, there are lists online where you can search the top 50 biggest dark websites and what they sell. It's not a question of law enforcement not knowing that these things are out there. Part of it is building a criminal case. So you want to be able to build a criminal case. And getting back to this other slide I showed you here, once law enforcement spots an error, like the one the alleged administrator of this website made, which again, according to the indictment, was including his email address, pimpalex91@hotmail.com. They need something like this to actually build a criminal case. You can shut down these services, but what the DOJ wants is to build a criminal case and put somebody in handcuffs. This mistake, this alleged mistake, gave them what they needed. So that's what takes the time here. You can shut down these sites. They could shut down these sites within hours if they wanted to, but they want to build a criminal case. Question here is Bitcoin sold on the dark web? It's not so much that you have to go to the dark web to buy Bitcoin, but what you'll see from this slide is all the transactions on these sites occur in digital currencies, such as Bitcoin, Monero, or others. You'll see here, according to DOJ, more than $1 billion in illegal transactions in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies occur on just this one website alone. Doesn't mean that the operator made $1 billion. It just means they helped facilitate allegedly more than $1 billion in illegal transactions. So you can buy Bitcoin. Buying Bitcoin is not illegal. You don't need to go to the dark web to get it. There are obviously legitimate purposes for digital currency. But if you want to use it in a way that is more anonymous than your credit card, that's where you go to these dark websites, and you have to have a Bitcoin wallet, and that's how these transactions occur. But again, let me stress, and I think this is really important because a lot of people, it's easy to get kind of spooked about this topic and say, oh my God, well, people are conducting all these illegal activities on these dark websites. We'll never find out who they are. Again, for a lot of these transactions, if you're buying drugs, if you're buying weapons, if you're ordering a hitman, things like that, you're going to need to meet somebody in person. You're going to either need to meet somebody in person, or you're going to need to take delivery of something. And that's always the weakest link in these types of operations. Is if you're buying illegal drugs from this website, you're going to want those drugs, and you're going to need them sent somewhere. So at some point, you're going to have to go pick up those drugs from some location, probably your home. And those are just, that's, again, shooting fish in a barrel for law enforcement because you've provided them literally with a map to your home and implicated yourself in a crime. We're getting some great questions. Please feel free to keep them coming. We love getting questions like these. Is the dark web popular in other parts of the world as well, like India? Sure. Yeah, the answer is, I don't have stats offhand, but it's a global thing. If you can get on the internet, you can access these websites. However, there is one caveat to that. Something like an illegal drug market like this, or malware and things like that, they have their own communities. I mean, they have their own target audiences. AlphaBay was an English language website, so that obviously indicates that it was targeting, Western audiences, English-speaking audiences. So, yes, in response to the question, these are global. It's a global phenomenon, but you'll also have targeted audiences for these particular services. AlphaBay just happened to be an English language one. Is there a reason why the guy operating AlphaBay was in Thailand? Is it easier to run these marketplaces from certain jurisdictions? Another good question here. Let me show you the picture again of the alleged administrator of AlphaBay. This is Alexander Cazares. He was arrested in Thailand and he was found hanged in his jail cell in an apparent suicide. The reason he was in Thailand, we don't know, but what we do know is a lot of hackers hang out in Thailand. Part of the reason is it's just considered a nice place to live. It's also a little bit harder to be arrested there. It doesn't mean you're out of reach of international law enforcement. Clearly, in this case, this person was, but it's a nice place to be. So, people, if you're a hacker and you're not tied to a particular location for your work, we see this a lot. People go to live in the Mediterranean. They go to live in Southeast Asia. They go to live in resorts. If you're making millions of dollars, you want to live in a nice place. So that's kind of one of the answers. But also there is a big hacker community there. So there is infrastructure. There are people who can help you with technical things if this is your line of work. Question here is, how is payment for a product typically made? Do they take regular currency or credit cards? I like this question because these are the same questions I have. I follow this space. I look at dark web forums. I obviously talk to a lot of cybersecurity experts who monitor these things very, very closely and are on these forums all the time. But understanding how these things work is really interesting. And the way it works is it's not cash. It's not credit cards. It is Bitcoin. It is digital cryptocurrencies. Because you think about what it takes to actually pay somebody in cash. You've got to know their address. Well, if I'm selling illegal narcotics or I'm selling weapons, I don't want to give you my address. How do I even know that you're a real buyer? So I'm not going to give you an address. I'll give you a Bitcoin wallet address that I only access through Tor and is anonymized for myself as well. That's going to provide me as a seller of illicit goods, if that's for folks on the site. It's going to provide them a level of anonymity that they need. It's an absolute necessity. So you could pay with a credit card, but it kind of defeats the whole purpose. And if you're operating an illegitimate business, you're not just going to go to Visa and say, "Hey, I need to set up an account. I need to process drug transactions." You may try to launder them, but the rise of cryptocurrency has just made it so much easier for criminals to do business online. And again, I should state there are lots of legitimate reasons for cryptocurrencies as well. But one of the side effects is criminals use them too. Another question here, we're getting some great ones, again, thank you, is what will happen to invisibility and anonymity on the dark web after this? Well, again, maybe I'm jaded because I've covered this space for a while, but the takedown of AlphaBay is a big win for the Justice Department. It's a big win for prosecutors and law enforcement. It will do, in my opinion, next to nothing to stop the spread of malware and drugs and weapons online, because there's obviously a market for it. People are willing to take extreme risks to facilitate these transactions online, and there's a ton of money in it. So what people are going to do, what criminals are going to do, is they're going to go to any of the other hundreds or thousands of dark web sites. And the analogy should be this: is like it used to be a Silk Road. Silk Road was the big dark website, and that famously got taken out a few years back. And been many stories written about it. The trial occurred, and that was the big website. And a lot of people, after that site got taken down, were asking similar questions like, does this mean that the dark web is done for good? And it's like, of course not. What happens is sites like AlphaBay spring up, and then now that AlphaBay is cut down, there'll just be others as well. And it really mimics what happens in real life, and not just on the internet. Just because you take out one, street-level drug dealer does not mean that people are going to stop selling drugs on that street corner. What that means is you've taken out one street-level drug dealer. Even if you take down the sellers, all that does is it creates an opening for another one. So, again, my main takeaway for viewers on this is It's important to understand how this works because these sites are facilitating, they're helping facilitate the opioid crisis here in the U.S., and they're also helping facilitate the ease with which websites and other digital services are hacked, because this is where hackers trade their malware. This is where they learn how to hack. This is where they buy tools that allow them to attack websites and take them down. So basically any manner of bad behavior, it can be facilitated through these websites. But I also should say, so there's not a lot practical that you can do. This show is all about practical tips, typically. But in this case, there's not a lot practically you can do to protect yourself from bad behavior against you occurring on these websites, such as your stolen data being sold there. I think you should just know that the rise of these websites is not this kind of uncontrollable, unmonitorable, if that's a word, phenomenon that is just completely outside the realm of, outside of the control of law enforcement. As this case shows, as the AlphaBay takedown shows, law enforcement is all over this stuff. I mean, it really is a matter of resources in terms of who can they make the best case against and which websites are worth devoting law enforcement resources to. So I think that's just really important to note. Just because it's called the dark web doesn't mean law enforcement doesn't have visibility into it. In fact, the visibility they gain is almost perfect visibility in some cases for law enforcement operations. And that's really important to know as well. We've got a couple more questions here, then we will wrap. It's, again, thank you for everybody who's written in. Last two here, can you get scammed in the dark web? If everything is anonymous, how do you know it's real? Very good question. Of course you get scammed in the dark web. You're buying drugs, you're buying weapons, you're doing illegal things online. So, if you send somebody hundreds or thousands of dollars in Bitcoin, you don't know who they are. They don't know who you are. So the ability of them to just kind of vanish with your money, of course, it's high. But the same could happen if you're buying drugs on the street corner and somebody pulls out a gun and says, I'm taking your money, I'm walking away. So you could get scammed. However, there is a perverse incentive online, and this is really important. Like what we've seen with the rise of companies like Uber and Airbnb and all of these, sharing economy companies, is online reputation actually really matters. And it's not just in the legitimate world, in the illegitimate world as well, such as dark web forums. Reputation actually matters a lot, so like people can grade you, they can give you starred ratings. AlphaBay, I believe, had a function like this as well. So if you're known as a scam artist, if you're known as somebody who rips people off from their money, that can come back to haunt you. Again, we're talking about a criminal element here. However, there is kind of this perverse sense of accountability that some of these websites start to provide. Last one here is, how many of these types of dark websites exist? Tens, hundreds, more? I don't have a figure offhand, but cursory research will show you that there are hundreds, if not thousands of these things, all of different sizes and specialties. And of course there are lots of hidden sites as well. They're truly hidden sites, which are sites that only people who are operating at the highest levels of criminality will have access to. But these are the sites that we're talking about today, and this is a topic that we're going to come back to, with some regularity, are consumer level sites. They want to sell you drugs, they want to sell you weapons, they want to sell you illegal things. So they're looking for a consumer audience. It should be noted, there are lots of other hidden services that are decidedly not looking for a consumer audience. They're only looking to do business with other criminals, selling large amounts of drugs, selling large amounts of weapons, things like that. That's kind of the wholesale model. You're not going to find those in any Google search. Well, with that, we've run out of time. I really want to thank everybody for writing in with questions. It's always a pleasure for us to try to answer some of these and demystify some of these aspects of the cybersecurity world. So hopefully we've done that today. Again, the dark web is something we're going to come back to with some regularity, and we hope that you learn something from it. So as always, please feel free to write me offline. I'm on Twitter at JordanR1000. That's the letter JORDAN, the letter R1000. And also, please feel free to tweet to us at Technology. That's the Bloomberg Technology Twitter page. And you can always go to our website, which is bloomberg.com/technology. You'll have links to archived episodes of this show. And you'll also see another show by a colleague, Mark Gurman. It's called Gadgets with Gurman. It's another great show you might want to check out. And we have a great podcast there called Decrypted that I contribute to as well. So please do check that out. Thanks again for watching. We'll be back next week. We broadcast live at 12 noon Eastern here from Washington, D.C. Thanks again for watching. This is Digital Defense.